Kyle, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, Q?
Chilling, man, chilling. So I know we were talking a little bit before we got live about how I haven't talked to you like at all since eighth grade first science class, Mr. Landa. So how you been, man?
Dude, I've been great. I mean, so much has happened, since then. Like, I feel like as soon as high school finished up, uh, kind of stopped talking to a lot of people, like most of us have. But I've lived in a bunch of other states. I've done a bunch of pretty cool shit. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss home every now and again. I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, it does come in waves every now and then. It has been good to be on be on like your own independent schedule and stuff, and seeing different places. I mean, you and me both have definitely done our fair share of traveling, so that aspect of it is very nice. But like you're saying, like every now and then you do feel that missing of home. So I definitely understand that. What's
Yeah, for
one
sure.
aspect that you've been missing about home? Like when those waves do show up, what is that one aspect?
Um, I definitely say the people more than anything. Like, especially like where we're from. I mean, most of the people that went to high school with, I've been going to school with since kindergarten, and then of course almost my entire family is there. So I'd say absolutely the people more than anything.
Yeah, you miss the beats at all?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely miss, like, no matter where you are in Sutter or even most parts of Yuba City, like you can always see them like looming off in the distance.
Yeah, they do have a special magic to them. And since we're talking about outdoors, like share with me some of your hiking experiences that you've had since you've been out and about doing some traveling. The connection is a little bit in and out. So, did you hear me at all, man?
No, you cut out. What'd you say?
It's okay. So I was saying since we were talking about the buttes and stuff like that, and before we got live, you were talking about all the hiking that you have been doing. Um, you mentioned South Dakota and stuff, and I say you being a really big outdoorsman and getting into that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, when I finished up high school, I moved to Montana to go to college at Montana State, and that's where I really got into like outdoorsiness and hiking and stuff like that. Because I mean, where we're from, like it's pretty limited by way of where you can go. But out in Montana, it's at least in the western half of the state, it's literally everywhere. So that's what I did a lot of in college because for the most part, it's pretty inexpensive to do so as opposed to stuff like skiing or hunting or any other hobbies that are pretty expensive to get into. So I did that quite a bit, and then that just kind of carried over with me no matter where I went. So, like I was mentioning to you before we started recording here, is I lived in Texas for a year. Did some hiking, but it's pretty flat out there, at least in Central Texas. And then now that I'm up here in South Dakota, there's a pretty good amount of hiking to do up here too. So that's kind of what I do in my spare time when there's plenty of daylight and I need to just get out and relax a bit.
Yeah. So how is South Dakota been for you? I have literally like zero people that I know who have had any experience in South Dakota, except for you right now. So this is why I want
Yeah,
to pick your brain a little bit. So
yeah,
what's up
man.
there?
You and most people, like pretty much everybody who, when they hear the word, when they hear the name South Dakota, they're like, "Isn't that where Mount Rushmore is?" And that's all they really know about it. And
Right.
you're correct. Like I live like 40 minutes from Mount Rushmore, but South Dakota is awesome, man. Like I live in the western half of the state, which is where most of the tourism is, rightfully so, because of Mount Rushmore, because of we have a couple of national parks out here. We got Badlands and the Wind Cave National Park. Devil's Tower is out here. It's actually in Wyoming, but it's only a couple-hour drive. And then we have kind of encompassed within all of that, or most of that, is the Black Hills National Forest, which is just this um, big old outcrop of forest and mountainous terrain, kind of just over in the southwestern edge of the state here where I live. That's kind of just like this little oasis of like opportunities for outdoor activities, namely hiking. There's tons of hunting and fishing out here. There is a ski resort too. Like it's a little slice of paradise in a state that not a lot of people know about. So there isn't that much of a tourist base for the outdoor stuff, at least. Like obviously tons of people come here for Mount Rushmore, a shit ton come for the Sturgis motorcycle rally every August. But it's awesome because of all the places that I've lived and been to, for that matter, for outdoor activities, this one's probably been the least populous for like the experience that I get. So Montana, like obviously there isn't a lot of people that live in Montana either, but we still had a pretty big tourist base. And then all the hiking that I did around Bozeman, my college town, there was a pretty big population of people out there hiking too, because a bunch of young college kids want to get out, right? And then other places I've been to, like Colorado or like southern Utah, where I've been hiking, there's just a shit ton of people because there's so many people either living in that state or there's just a huge tourist space for that thing. So I love South Dakota because you don't get much of that tourist space almost. For exactly. You don't get much of that people traffic. You still get a really great experience when you're out hiking.
Nice, man. Nice. Did you hit up Zion at all when you were in Utah?
I did. That is to this day still one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to, and probably my favorite hike that I've ever done.
I agree, man. That the drive through that national park alone is representative of the beauty of that park. I've never seen mountain face walls that big. There's a part where you go through the tunnel and you come out and you see this huge mountain face, and you're looking at it 3 or 4 times, and it's still not wrapping around in your head like that thing's that fucking big. And that,
yeah, man.
that beauty alone, I was like, holy shit, man. And the hike that I did was I did the subway trail hike in Zion, which was like, I think it was like 7 or 8 miles, but it was there were no signs. So everything was just, once you get down to the actual basin of the hike, you're kind of on your own, and hopefully you find it. A lot of people do get lost. They have to get helivac'd out because they go past the exit when you're coming back towards the entry of it. There's like one little sign that people miss all the time. They go past it. But it was a good hike. Which hike did you do?
Oh, I did. I believe it was called the Lookout Point trail. That one was, I think it was in the realm of 6 to 7 miles. And it was awesome because like, it kind of gave like a little bit of each of the different things that Zion would have to offer, or just South Utah in general. So like it started out with just a bunch of switchbacks, and you got some really scenic views of the majority of the park. Then, you started getting into like the slot canyons, and then doing some more steep uphill climbing before you finally reach this amazing lookout point of the valley. I think you can see, was it Angel's Landing from there? Like perfectly, like you're well above it. Like, oh my God, it was.
Oh, you're above Angel's Landing.
Yes.
Holy shit.
It has been, let's see, I did that back in 2016. So it has been a little bit, so don't fully quote me on that, but I do remember it being just absolutely unforgettable. I remember spending like probably an hour to an hour and a half just at the top. Like, it was awesome. Nice,
man. Have you been taking pictures the entire time you've been doing that? Or have you kind of just been keeping it in the old cerebral brain?
A little bit of both, usually. Like, I really do like taking pictures of it because from time to time I'll just like go back and review like all the cool hikes I've been on, all the cool shit I've seen. Generally, if it's a hike that I've already done, then I usually won't. So I'll just like throw the phone on silent or even on airplane mode sometimes. Just go out there, and if I'm by myself, then I'll just enjoy the sounds of nature and not worry about technology getting in the way.
I do know, man, and that's one thing that I really do like about hiking is especially out here in Sedona, which is like 2.5 hour drive away. Have you been to Sedona yet?
Yeah. Oh, love Sedona, man. Dude, I've been there a few times now.
It's Every single time I come into the actual park itself, I'm just like, dude, this is not of this world. Just the colors and the feeling of the mountains. It's just the energy there is amazing. But the point that I was talking about earlier was like one of the favorite things that I like about hiking, which is what you talked about. It's like getting away from technology. I just like listening to the wind and the absolute silence of the actual trail itself. That part for me is just, it's very separating from what's actually going on in your life. It's a way to kind of take yourself away from it, relax, get primal a little bit too, just like hearing the natural sounds and stuff. Yeah, man, that's one aspect that I really liked about it.
Yeah, man, I absolutely agree. Like usually when I'm out there hiking, if I'm by myself, like if I hear something off in the distance, I usually like snap judgment. I think it's like an animal. So I'll usually stop like dead in my tracks and just sit there for a little bit and listen. And 9 times out of 10, it always just ends up being a bird or something like that. But then I kind of just stop there and listen for a little longer, and you can kind of just like hear the ambient noises of like the nature around you, and it's just extremely relaxing.
I do know, man. I had a really cool experience where the wind was like the waves of an ocean for me in this experience, which is something that I've never come across before, even perceived the wind to be. I was in Flagstaff it was my birthday, and I was in like a mountain biking, like expedition type deal, whatever. And I was sitting down after the ride. I was just like relaxing, calming down, just kind of listening. And I heard the wind out in the distance. And there's enough forest, like aspen trees, to kind of create that sound of the wind coming through the leaves and stuff. So as I was sitting there, I was like, I hear it very, very faintly. And the longer I listened to it, the louder it came, the louder it came. And as it got closer and closer towards me, like the leaves started to move, and then it just like passed over me and then kept going. It's like, holy shit. The wind was like almost like the waves of the ocean right there. I was like, that was a very interesting experience. I've never seen the wind that way.
Dude, that's awesome. I think, let's see, an experience that I've had like that, like kind of a similar nature, not exactly like that, but I was in Guatemala back in 2015 in the summer doing this volunteer service trip, and toward the second half of the trip, we started just going around different parts of the country, taking in all the touristy spots and everything. So we went to like Tikal National Park, where all the ancient Aztec ruins are. It was absolutely gorgeous. And at one point we got like pretty deep into some of the more like rainforesty areas of Guatemala, and we stayed at a hostel in there. And I remember one night when we were staying there, I walked outside to go do something. I think I went to go down to like one of the bathrooms, and I just stopped for a second and listened. And I think it was like 11 o'clock at night or something like that. And I mean, we were like in the middle of the fucking jungle. I mean, like or rainforest, And I never realized like how loud all the bugs are in like tropical areas like that. So it was amazing to like just stop there and like listen, like, holy shit, is that actually like the forest like making that noise? Like that's insane. Like it was almost as loud as like people talking. Like it was absolutely insane. I've never experienced something like that. But then again, I've never really lived somewhere like that humid or like foresty in that sense. And so that was a really, really cool experience, because I honestly just stood there for like 5 or 10 minutes just taking in that sound that I've never heard naturally before.
Right. Dude, thank you for sharing that. That is really cool. Because it's like, like you were saying, like how the forest is making that noise just by itself every night. This is what it sounds like the metropolis city, just during the middle of the day, car horns and trolley cars and all that shit like that, just like the natural sounds of that environment.
Exactly.
Yeah, dude. So we wanted to talk a little bit about mental resiliency, and I wanted to get into that topic. That's something that you shared with me that you wanted to talk about on the podcast. So what was something that came to mind that you wanted to share that aligned up with mental resiliency?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's been a pretty hot topic over over the past few years, especially in my line of work. So it's something that's, I think, is constantly brought up, but I think that people are reluctant to share like their own personal details about it because they kind of take it in like a black and white perspective in a way. And so like they think that like, oh, if I'm feeling like sad or upset long term, then I obviously need some kind of professional help. Or, you know, if I don't get help, God forbid, then I'm going to eventually be suicidal or something like that, which both of those things are absolutely not true. And so I think that what I'd like to see is people kind of break down the walls of that definition and move toward this new way of thinking of it, where it's not about just like seeking professional help if you need it. I mean, if you do, then by all means do so, but it's more just about understanding the importance of talking to someone, you know, anyone, a friend, a family member, about issues that you're having, like even if it's just like venting about it and not looking for an explicit solution to it, that like pays such positive dividends from my personal experience and the experience of listening to others present their problems to me. And so basically just what I'm getting at is that it's kind of just this continuous process of healing, I'd say, instead of like the traditional way of thinking of it, where it's like, oh, I'm sad, I need to go see a therapist. Well, I don't want to, kind of thing.
Right. It's I think it's the idealistic perception that people have of instantaneous solutions, you know, and especially with the pharmacology aspect to it, with, you know, depression, use medication. And this is true for some people. But like your experience has, you know, you said that, that just like that constant continuous talking about it with friends or family, or like not actually looking for some actual solution, just kind of talking about it, has been monumental for you. And I agree, that has been the case for me as well. It has just been really important for people to just be able to talk without in a judgment free zone, you know, because there's a lot of like, if you would to share your vulnerabilities with somebody, that is putting you in that place of receiving some sort of judgment or feedback that may hurt you, you know, and that feeling of putting yourself in a vulnerable place is that's scary for people. And so, you know, you're talking about the longevity of it, of like that mental resiliency. It does take a lot of time. It's not going to be something that just naturally happens instantaneously. And that's what I would think that you were trying to get at, as like the resiliency aspect of it, is the continuous longevity of continuing to talk about it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, basically, it's never just a black and white answer of like, oh, I'm feeling sad, I need to go seek help. Oh, I'll be better after this, kind of thing. Like, no, it's never it's never that simple, really. Like, I think that there's so much that can be done with just a very slow process of just talking through things, and then, you know, if that doesn't work for you, then seeking professional help, you know, as required. That'll really elicit positive change better if you need it. But I'm saying, yeah, it's a continuous process that I think people need to do a better job of understanding. And maybe people do understand. I'd say they do. It's just, it is really difficult, like you were saying, taking that, I guess, proverbial leap of faith and talking about those things to people, because there's so many variables that come into play when you're trying to bring up those things. Like, maybe some people are stubborn and don't want to admit that they're having issues, or they don't think it's necessary to talk about it. Other people might just think it's kind of awkward, or, you know, you don't want to seem vulnerable. I think that's a really big one that you had brought up, is you don't want to present that vulnerability like, oh, I don't want this person to know that, you know, I'm feeling kind of sad about this, and then they're going to go spread it like wildfire, and then all of a sudden I'm not the tough guy at work or whatever, you know.
Right. The perception of who I am giving to other people can be taken down, and that's like a sense of identity in a way. and that's a big part that I've found with the mental resiliency aspect of, just talking about the way that you're feeling, is that it does break down those identity barriers, those identity like foundations that you've created with the people around you. And that aspect is very terrifying to go into, because it's like, yo, I am literally giving you everything that I'm going through right now, and you're going to take it the way that you're going to take it. And this is where I have to have the courage and the foundational strength in myself to just be confident in that, which is nerve wracking, because naturally we want social acceptance, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a very important aspect for us, almost on a primal level, to be socially accepted, because social acceptance equals inclusion, and that equals food, right? And a very
Yeah.
very, very low monkey level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that breaking down of those identity barriers are very scary, because that's a comfortable space to be in. It's everything that you've known, and why would I want to continue to go towards something that I don't know, right? It's almost like synonymously with a hiking trail that you don't really know anything about, right? It's like, if I want to
Yeah.
go down this trail, I have an idea of conceptually of what it should look like or what it's going to be like, but I truly don't know. And that aspect of not knowing is fearful.
Absolutely.
So, what is an experience with you that you've kind of built that mental resiliency for yourself?
Ooh, good question. Honestly, I think that a lot of it started in when we were in high school, actually.
Thanks, man.
Because in high school, I definitely wasn't the way I thought of it. I definitely wasn't unpopular, but I definitely wasn't popular. I was kind of like this weird middle of the road spot where I was kind of like everyone's friend because I didn't really piss anybody off, and I wasn't that weird. But at the same time, I'm a pretty shy dude. I definitely have bouts of awkwardness, and even still today. And situations like that, made me the result of, I wouldn't say as far as bullying, but I've definitely been made fun of plenty of times growing up through school. And so I think that experiences through that, the more I think about it now that I'm older, has kind of built my mental resiliency in a positive way, because I've made it out to be that way just through life experiences, and then through some counseling that I went through when I was in college. Unfortunately, people who are the subject of bullying, sometimes they don't have the same outcome. So it usually turns into more negative connotations as they grow up. But I find myself very fortunate that I was able to kind of channel it into a positive outcome. And so I think that the way I see mental resiliency now started back in high school, even though I wasn't fully aware of it, kind of thing. And then once I moved off to college, being in a brand new place, not knowing anybody, that just made things kind of worse in terms of my mental health. And so I think it was my second or third year, I finally decided to get some level of professional help about it, because I noticed that some issues with mental health weren't really going away. I didn't have full on depression or was suicidal or anything like that, but I still wanted to talk to someone about it. And so for a semester, I went through counseling, and I was able to, I guess, refine my mental resiliency fully there, to where I now understand that, it's okay to not be okay some days. It's okay to vent your problems to somebody as long as they're receptive to it, and they're willing to listen and, provide feedback if you're looking for feedback, kind of thing. So I guess that it was a mix of negative experiences and then just talking through my issues with a professional that was able to help build my mental resiliency.
So did the professional give you techniques to practice building that mental resiliency? And what kind of worked for you?
I'd say, let's see, from what I remember of it, it wasn't as much that, it was more just talking through my issues and putting them into perspective. And then like, what was that?
I'm listening. The internet
Oh,
kind
sorry.
of
I
like,
thought you were asking a
yeah,
question.
no, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, it was mostly just with each session, like we'd discuss more and more things. And then, you know, I'd have these sessions, I think it was like once a week or something like that. And I was able to just spend that week just kind of sitting on those things that we were talking about. And I progressively just saw this positive change in my head where like I was able to put things in a better perspective, lay some things to rest, and just generally get some negative things off of my head and either channel them into positive things, or was just able to like let those things go in a sense.
Right. What were those things that you were having like troubles with? Do you mind sharing? Or
I think it was generally a lot of it was when I moved off to college. I for the first, I think, semester or so, like I was having a really rough time like finding people to get to know, because I wasn't living in like a traditional dorm. I was living in like these apartments on campus with I think I had 3 other roommates, and I really didn't get along with any of them. And my RA, I think he was aware of it, but I wasn't coming to him about how much of an issue it actually was. And so, you know, I kind of just spent like the first semester and a half or so of school by myself. And that was a really difficult transition going from the summer following high school, where like I was like at the peak of the number of friends that I had. I was in a relationship at the time, and it literally went from like 1 month, like having all those things, to the next month moving off to college. Like girlfriend at the time broke up with me. Like I stopped talking to a bunch of people, and then it's like, well, shit, now I'm 1,000 miles away from everybody I know. I don't know any of these people. Like I'm questioning why I even went to the school now. Like,
right.
So I think that that presented a whole new world of issues mentally, and then amplified a few things from previous experiences. So,
Right. So like, do you think that the changing of like the mental, like the self-talk with yourself was a big aspect to like change those habits for you? Because you're talking about like the mental space that you were having and the negative perceptions that you were having. Were those changes rooted in like habits, like changing of habits essentially?
I'd say yes. So by changing habits, I'd say more of just like thinking of things in a different light, as opposed to how I was thinking about things. So like I'm human. I definitely have like pessimistic tendencies as it relates to a lot of things. And so I think that back then I was far more pessimistic and self-defeating when it came to tons of things, like my performance in school, you know, personal life, like friendships, building friendships. But through building this mental resiliency, you know, I'm a lot better off in terms of like accepting if I do like poorly on something with my job or with like graduate school now, or like if all of a sudden a friend like doesn't want to like associate with me anymore just because of like distance growing us apart or something like that. Like I'm much better off accepting those things in a more positive manner than I was previously.
Gotcha. So it's just like you're able to be there for yourself to get through those situations.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Like even to this day, like I don't, very few things make me mad, but there's only one thing that will consistently make me angry, and that's myself. And you know, years ago, like I'd get so mad at myself, like if I got like a C on an assignment, or like if like a friend stopped talking to me or something like that, I'd immediately like completely blame myself, my performance, or anything like that. But now, like, I'm much better off in terms of acceptance. Like, hey, if it was 100% my fault, then, you know, I'm totally fine with it now for the most part. Or I'm able to better put things into perspective.
That's important to have, man, that objectivity with yourself.
Yeah.
Because, you know, seeing that, okay, talking about that C on that test, it's like, okay, for me, an issue would just be like, fuck that test, it was wrong. Like, externalize it, like it has nothing to do with me. But that objectivity with yourself, it's like, okay, you know, in your case, all right, Kyle, did I actually study as hard as I could have? Did I actually put in the work that deserved that C? Right. And that having that objectivity is really important, because now you can almost coach yourself in that aspect, because before it was that negative mindset of like self-critical. And so that doesn't help at all. That just puts it down in the dumps even more. Right. So
exactly.
yeah, man. And that's good that you built up that mental resiliency with yourself of, okay, it happened, it's done, it's over with. Let's focus on getting back to the next task, essentially.
Yeah, like it's amazing. Like now, I feel like now, whenever something like that happens, like I'm able to think of like all these different variables that came into play as to why, like, you know, this particular event happened. Like, okay, was this mostly on me? Was this mostly on outside factors? Like, oh, the reason why I did so poorly on this was because, you know, X, Y, and Z, as opposed to, you know, years back where it was just, hey, you did this because you're a failure kind of thing.
Right. And that's important to have that communication with yourself. And that's another thing that we wanted to talk about too, is like the importance of having communication with people as well as like yourself. And, you know, that self-dialogue that you have with yourself, that changed also to be more resilient. And that is the importance of that communication with yourself, of having that healthy dialogue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So what's like if there's one thing about like communication that you wanted to talk to people about, what would it be?
Ooh, communication. So it's really cool. The more and more I think about communication, because, you know, we live in the world of the internet where literally billions of people are talking back and forth every single day. But one thing that I've noticed over the past few years is that face-to-face conversation, I feel like, is becoming less and less refined. And I'm curious about the reasons behind that, but of active listening and responding to those things that they just listened to. Because in a lot of conversations that I see, either like conversations that I have with people on a day-to-day basis, or conversations that I just kind of overhear, is that they're almost kind of one-sided in nature generally, where one person will say something and then the other person will respond in a way where it sounds like they didn't listen to a single word that person said. They just immediately start spitting off something like about themselves, or just something that they had already like determined that they're going to say, without taking the other person's words into account, if that makes sense.
It totally does make sense. I learned about this term called the social script, which is essentially like how people should behave in certain situations. One of the examples that they gave was, if you go to a restaurant, right, you expect for the hostess to greet you, take you to your table, the waiter to come up, ask for what do you want to drink. They come back with the drinks. You guys hungry? You order your food, right? But what breaks that social script is as if someone drops a glass or a fork or a plate. You know, as soon as that makes that noise, like, shh, you ever notice the entire restaurant stops talking? Everything stops for that small second. It's like quiet. Everybody looks over to the area and then they go back to what they were doing, because that was not part of the social script. That's not what's supposed to happen. So that gets everybody alerted, right? And now what we're talking about here is like the communication with people. It's like you're thinking that people are not really listening to what people are saying. They're just kind of responding in a way that is accepted. A good example that I think of when you're explaining this is, hey, good morning, how you doing? No, I'm doing good. How are you? Doing good. Okay, have a good day. You too. Bye. Right? The shit's just so fucking automatic. Like, where's like, there's no genuinity there. and it's almost as if like we've created this barrier of like, I don't have time to talk to you, you know, which in cases are true for sure. But I have recognized after having conversations with people like that, hey, how are you doing? Doing well. How are you doing? Good, doing good. I recognize, what the fuck was that? What was I just doing there? I wasn't doing anything.
Wow,
You know what I mean?
that is such a good point, because I definitely feel the same way. Like when I pass by like my supervisor or something like that in the hallway, and it's like, "Hey Kyle, how you doing? Good, sir. How are you? Good." Like what, we just said words to each other. Like there was no meaning behind that or anything. Like I
Right.
remember similar experience, kind of when I was going through one of my trainings. I remember I had a classmate who I bumped into him. I think we both like showed up early for class or something like that. And he's like, and it was I think we were like 2/3 of the way through training, and it was starting to get pretty stressful.
Mm.
And I'm like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He's like, "Good. How are you, man?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing all right." And he's like, "Really? How are you doing? Let's talk about that." Like my initial thought was like, wait, what? Like that's so strange that you asked that, but like that's how it should be. I mean, I get that, like that's a question that can turn pretty personal pretty quick, and like you don't want to, like, especially if you're in like a public setting, you probably don't want to like share exactly what's going on in your mind, right? Or
True.
you might be there for longer than the person will want to listen. But like it was just so strange, like he actually asked that question how it was meant to be asked, I guess. And I
Right.
wasn't prepared for it because I'm so conditioned to just, "Oh, how are you doing? Good. How are you? Good."
Right. That's a really good example. And and like you said, like the response is almost like, wait, what? Caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, and let me click back on to actually what is going in my life, you know? And it's very interesting that this is coming up because I've been uh, coming in contact with like this subconscious behavior, almost like this automatic pilot that we just been like, you even use the word conditioned, like
Mm-hmm.
conditioned to be, which is, I'm good. How are you? Good. Okay. See, bye. You know, that's like that subconscious behavior. And it's not very rewarding, you know? And I think
Right.
that's what you're getting at with this whole like communication aspect. It's like conversations needs to be more refined. Is that what you were saying? Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that there's so much untapped potential in terms of like, I guess, like intrinsic satisfaction would be the right term, with
Mm.
conversations. Instead, like, I feel like everything's just turning into just business, like, I mean, I'm a business major and I'm going to graduate school for my MBA. So believe me when I know about like, the whole time is money construct and like, hey, just get the point across. And then if they ask for details, give them details kind of thing. And I feel like like just normal conversations are kind of turning into that, where it's like you're just either going through the motions of small talk if you're just looking to socialize with somebody in a short manner, or you're just getting your point across, the other person's getting their point across, boom, done, kind of thing.
Right. And it makes you, now I'm thinking about, you know, outside of that interaction inside the business setting, how much time do people allocate to practice that skill, you know, to actually have those dialogues with friends or like relationship partners, or even mentors, right? Like how much time do people actually really do that? You know, I think that's a really good opportunity and I think that's why podcasting is becoming such a big thing, you know, especially with what Joe Rogan's doing. Is like he is creating space for people to have legit dialect, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's something that I don't think that people take a lot of time. I don't do that a lot. You know, I try and instill that with my friends as much as I can, but you know, there's a place and time for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it really just boils down to like the individual level, like understanding, what it takes to have an effective conversation and the positive things that can come from it intrinsically. Like it's not something that you can necessarily like teach in a classroom. Like you could teach fundamentals of it to raise awareness, but I think that it just boils down to like the individual or individuals, since conversations, they both have to be like receptive to those notions and be willing to actively listen, be willing to respond to what the person's saying and have those meaningful conversations. And yeah, like I like what you mentioned about podcasting, you know, providing an effective avenue for that, because I mean, honestly, like me personally, I've never been really a big fan of podcasts, because like I think that they become much more popularized in recent years. And then prior to that, I always saw them as just like kind of one of those trendy things, like, I don't know, CrossFit or any shit like that, where it's like, you kind of just do it to say that you do it. Like, oh, you listen to music on your commute? Well, I listen to podcasts, kind of thing. But I think
right, like a virtue thing almost.
Exactly. So I think that they're much more effective nowadays, I'd say, in terms of, you know, opening up a great avenue for having effective communications, and then that way, people who are listening to them, you know, can bite off on some of the things that people are talking about, and think like, you know what, I want to have like a really meaningful conversation now with people, or like, I want to take what I learned from this podcast and like have a discussion, you know, like with my friends or with my colleagues, about what I learned, and like that elicits such great conversation from things like that.
Agreed, man. Agreed. And that's one thing that, like I'm going to reference Joe Rogan again, but that's one thing that he really brought to light for me was, you know, watching, I mean, this is not going in a political arena at all, like a conversation, I'm just using it as an example of watching like the political debates, or, you know, Fox News or CNN or any type of like interview that they have with those people. You know, and I really recognize that it's not a lot is being said there. If anything, it's just general superficial shit that warrants great conversation, but doesn't really say too much. You know, and that's the difference with the podcast. I mean, you and I have been having an ongoing dialogue for no cuts, no nothing, for probably like close to like 35 minutes right now. You know, we've been able to like have consistent, like feed off of each other back and forth without like time constraints or anything like that. And that's where we can have that refined conversation that you're wanting to see more with. Like, I really loved how you said untapped potential, because I fucking agree with that, man. I really, really do. And that's a really good perception to have of it, because I do really, really agree with it.
Yeah, like exactly. Like I know some people make the argument that the art of conversation is dead, and I would absolutely disagree, because we communicate more than ever. I mean, like I said, just look at the fucking internet. Like, billions of people are talking every single day. Like, you know, email traffic is in the trillions, you know, every single day, and all that stuff. But it's the art of like refined communication. That's the part that's kind of dying. Like having meaningful conversations and everything like that, because people act like they're so strapped for time nowadays that they just want to, you know, get some words across, get their point across, and then be done with it. And in some contexts, like, I get it, like in a business setting, sometimes, like I said, you know, time is money. So you need to just, hey, put this in layman's terms. If I want details, I'll ask for details, kind of thing. Like that's how I handle things personally. Like, I just want people to get straight to the point. And then if I have questions, I'll ask questions. But like, if I'm just having like a conversation with somebody, like a personal one, then I'd like to, you know, have some meaningfulness to it, you know? Yeah.
It's like, it's as if we need to get better at, or get more in tune with like switching off that business conversation or business lingo, you know. And it's funny because, you know, people talk about like the importance of get to the point, straight to the point. What's the facts of a business conversation? But the thing that always lasts within like a business setting is the actual relationships with people. It kind of froze up a little bit. We'll be patient. Hopefully the internet kicks back on. In the meantime, I'll be doing a solo podcast. So, yeah, man, I hope that continued to record.
Yeah, hopefully.
It like froze up, and I was like, okay, we're gonna have a solo podcast. Just kind of trying to keep the dialogue going. But so what I was saying was, before it cut out, it's funny how, you know, people really push for getting the details across, being straight to the point. Okay, what does this mean for the business? XYZ, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing that always lasts in business is relationships, and it's very hard to create. I mean, you can create business relationships for sure, right? This guy's straightforward. He knows what he's talking about. That's respectable. But I think, and maybe this is an inexperienced opinion, but I think that actual relationship with that person is what's going to continue to keep that business partnership going for the long run, as well as, proper business etiquette and, business production. But I still think that the relationship with that person is going to be the thing that's going to be that separating factor.
I would 100% agree with you, man. I've read plenty of academia about the importance of building relationships, especially outside of the business context. And even in some of my business courses, it mentions this importance, particularly because of it can be used from a strategic perspective because of things like personal biases, like halo effect and stuff like that. So being able to making sure you're likable at work, and then outside of the workplace, making sure you're likable there can really pay off in the long run as you move throughout life, especially in my line of work where I'm moving every 2 or 3 years. I know I know people all across the country at this point, and I've only been doing this for 3.5 years now, but it's amazing that I have so many different, I guess, resources, if you will, across the country to be able to pull different perspectives from different parts of the country, different organizations that those people are a part of. And then, people from my undergraduate and people from my graduate school, I'm able to leverage them to be able to hey, when I'm done with this career, I can, start my second career by hey, can you give me a foot in the door with your company here? Or what can you tell me about this company, kind of thing? Being able to leverage that to help my professional development in the long run. I know plenty of guys in my work right now who, they even said if I'm done here, if I, God forbid, lost my job the next day, all I have to do is hit my buddy up in California or whatever, and boom, I have a job that's going to pay the same, if not more. And I can almost guarantee I'm going to get hired because that person knows me so well, and they're, upper level management kind of thing,
Right. And that's the relationship that goes outside of that actual, business lingo or business relationship that you have with that person. And my experience with that is, for right now I'm in grad school, so I'm in this job where I'm selling memberships for a gym local to AZ. And majority of the time that I talk with people who are getting memberships, you can feel the difference when someone's pitching something to you or someone's generally trying to talk to you. And from my experience, when I am being super businessy and only focusing on saying the things I need to say, right, that helps to some degree. It gets them interested, but what really ties them to that place is the actual rapport that I am able to build with them in that 2 to 3 minute interaction that I have with them. And that's what goes the long run, because when they come in the door, they're not going to be super professional to me. They're like, hey, Quentin, how's it going? Hey, how are you doing? That's what for me feels inviting. And I would assume that it would be the same for them because they're also human too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That actually reminds me of a great example that I actually heard during a TED Talk. Yeah, we have here in Rapid City, we do a TEDx event every year. And so I went to TEDx Rapid City last year, had a lot of great TED Talks there. And one of them, I believe he was a school teacher in Colorado, came up to talk about rethinking the way that we teach in America. And one really great point that has stuck with me ever since then was that when you're a teacher, it's important to not treat your students like a consumer, but rather treat them like a client. It's a continuous process of providing them, with those resources and having it be like a two-way street kind of deal. And I think that it can really be applied to a lot of things in life, particularly, when it comes to having like meaningful conversations, or even with your example, like treating every single person that you're conversing with for your job, as a client, as opposed to just like a one-off consumer, like, hey, here's what I have to offer. All right, bye. Like, no, it should be like a continuous process of like, oh, hey, I remember you. Like, how have you been? How's the family doing? Kind of thing, blah, blah, blah.
Right. I agree with you, man. I really do. And I think that's a really good point that he was talking about in that TED talk of, treat them as a client rather than a consumer, because that example that you gave of like, all right, here's what I have to offer. Okay, bye. That just feels like in the moment it's good. You get that reward of like, okay, I got that commission, or I got that number on the board for the month. Right. But once they come back, it's almost like you try and kind of force that conversation. Have you ever experienced that, where it's like you got what you wanted, but you think that you should have a conversation with them, so you conversate with them for fuck's sake, but it just feels very forced, and you're just like, oh, no, okay, and then it's done with, over with, right? As opposed to having that like relationship with them, almost to a degree, where they come back in, you're like, yo, I recognize you, you recognize me, and that's where like that rapport starts to get built, and that trust and the client aspect about it starts to take place.
Absolutely. I see it a ton, in the business world today. And so I'm a business marketing major specifically, and I'm getting my MBA in marketing specifically. And so I've learned so much about like just how important it is to have that rapport and to have that continuous two-way conversation with your consumers, and the importance of treating them as clients, even if you're just like, a local restaurant. Like, it's so important that you provide like the most consistent, like best customer service and the best quality of food that you can, because especially in today's digital age, like literally anyone has this outlet to tell the entire world that like, hey, this restaurant sucks, or hey, this restaurant's really good, because of outlets like Facebook, because of Google, because of Yelp, all these things. Like, it's so much easier than ever to get your opinion across in the World Wide Web, and so anyone in the world can see that. And so it's so important that people are doing their job and doing their job well, and having that rapport with their consumer base. And so I think of that, and then I think like, well, why can't we just do that in our everyday lives? And I think that relates back to having like meaningful conversations and having personal rapport with people,
I do know, man. I definitely agree with you. And that, when you're talking about practicing that more in our personal life, that's where it starts. That's where that practice starts, of applying that in, your example of like the restaurant business. You can't just cut that off. That has to be something that you have to embody, because people are going to feel that inauthenticity, right? And it personally, I've experienced, it just feels good to be nice to people in general, because if you're being nice to someone and they're being nice to you, like especially in the umbrella of a business, that is so huge, man. Nobody wants to feel like they just got like taken advantage of, in a very loose term, of just like, all right, that person came in, they paid me my money, all right, now get the fuck out. Right? No one wants to feel like that, because that's not what's going to keep them coming back in whatever business it is, right? And like you were saying too, to back that up, like the media outlets, 100% agree with that, because that is so true. Because if they do feel that that inauthenticity, that's going to have a ripple effect.
Exactly. I think it's so important for businesses to be aware of the effect that word of mouth marketing has over anything. And there's actually a lot of businesses that are able to be extremely successful because of word of mouth marketing alone. Like, it's extremely impressive that they're able to do it so well. But yeah,
can you give me an example?
So one that comes to mind is actually Arizona Tea. So Arizona Tea, if I remember right, their tall boy cans of tea, those have been 99 cents for decades now, and they put almost no money into their advertising budget. They rely almost solely upon word of mouth marketing, and they've been able to do it so well, and so I think it's so important for companies and just individuals alike to understand the importance of word of mouth marketing as it relates to really any component of a business, or just in general, because you say again, like the restaurant example, you give someone bad customer service, well, they're going to go tell their friend, and then that friend's going to go tell 4 of their friends, kind of thing, and it has this giant ripple effect. So maybe they're not going to be explicit about it like online, but I can guarantee you, like 100+ people over the matter of a couple of weeks are now going to think that restaurant sucks, and they're just going to stop going.
Right, especially if it's like a local business where people like in like a small town, or like, so my friend, she lived in San Francisco for a little bit, and it's god awful to try and travel around there if you're doing it other than foot. So people who would live within that 3 or 4 block radius, that's essentially their little fucking mini community. So if you have a bad interaction with a coffee shop that just opened up, that coffee shop, more than likely, if that is a consistent basis of people having bad interactions, it's not just going to be that one person that's going to know about it. With your example, the ripple effect, that entire 3 or 4 block community is probably going to fucking hear about that place. And it may or may not pan out well for them. Right.
Absolutely. I see it quite a bit too in some of the smaller communities that I've been a part of. One example is here in Rapid City. Populations, I think it's probably only 2/3 of the size of like Yuba City. And so like when a new restaurant comes in, or even an existing restaurant, like if you start talking to locals, they know exactly all about like the suppliers of like their produce for that restaurant and all this other stuff. So like just from living here for I think it's 2 years now, like I've heard so many things about like, oh, make sure like if you're looking for seafood, go to this restaurant because like they have a contract with like a seafood supplier, so they get like the freshest ones in, because seafood's really difficult to come by over here, at least fresh stuff, because we're so far inland. And then another extreme example is hey, if you're going to go to a Chinese restaurant, only go to this one, because the other ones, their produce supplier is, absolute trash, kind of thing. Like it's really funny. It's really funny that hearing that ripple effect, both in a positive way and a negative way, and how it seems like the most random people in this community, know these things. So, and being in like a smaller sized population like this, like I think that word spreads extremely quickly. So
that word of mouth marketing, that's really cool about the 99-cent tea thing. I didn't even know that they did not spend that much money on their marketing campaigns.
Yeah.
That's dope, man. That's dope. So conversations, refining conversations are very important. Importance of communication. I've also found the importance of language to be very huge. With one, like mental health for sure. Like just practicing gratitude in general, I found very big benefits of that, which I think it definitely aligns with what you were saying earlier, like that naturally pessimistic mindset that us humans are a little bit victim to. It's very easy for us to see what we lack as opposed to what we do have currently. So the importance of using language of like, okay, I'm grateful for my water bottle, right? I'm grateful for my shoes. Like the more you continue to practice that gratitude, those small little things, and using that positive language, the more it the more it definitely connects with you on a lighter sense. It's not as heavy or like deeply rooted. Have you ever had any experiences with that?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you brought up. It sounds a lot like just the importance of putting things into perspective. You're able to, pull so much positivity from that, especially if you find yourself in kind of a negative slump. Yeah, I guess one example kind of relating to that would honestly be just in light of the restrictions associated with like COVID-19. So I'm an essential worker for it, and we're on this crazy schedule for work, as I talked to you a little bit about, where I'm working 14 days on and then 14 days off, but we have to be on recall during that off time just in case someone from the other group tests positive. We need to go right back into work while the other group quarantines. And, you look at it big picture and it's like, God, this freaking sucks, man. Like, I thought I was working long hours before, but fuck, like, I'm tired. I'm working night shift. Like, God damn it. But, the more you stop and think about it, and then you start to introduce those variables that I was talking about earlier with my mental resiliency spiel, like bringing in all these different variables, like you're able to put things into perspective and then realize that, things maybe aren't as bad, especially when you compare them to like situations that other people are having. And so as it relates to perspective, one thing that I like to do is when I'm having, those thoughts of like, God, this shit sucks thing, I start thinking in like short sentences of like, hey, I'm alive and healthy. I don't have any kind of symptoms, nor do any of my family or friends. I'm gainfully employed. I'm being paid. Unfortunately, some people, don't have that same luxury right now. What I'm doing is directly helping others in an incredibly positive way. And just kind of variables like that, like things that like, I guess on the day-to-day grind, you kind of take for granted, or you don't really think about, that you're kind of just thrown on the back burner, but like just reintroducing those things, into your head as perspective, like helps out quite a bit in my opinion.
I agree, man. I think that's a really good practice of, using those short little sentences and statements. And that is truly indicative of it really doesn't take much to kind of change your perspective on things. And this is the struggle that I have, and you have, and you shared, and I think other people as well do, is like, it's so comfortable to sit in that, like, oh, this fucking sucks. Like, oh, this shit, like I thought I was working long hours before, but now this, it's very easy to externalize the internal state of discontent. Right.
Exactly. And it's unfortunate too, because like, as you start introducing those negative thoughts like outward to people, they'll generally bite off on it too and start having those negative thoughts themselves, because as humans, we're kind of drawn to that negativity, as I'm sure you've read about in your graduate school studies, that we kind of like to bite off on the negative and build off of that as opposed to positive, because like so much in our daily lives is positive, even though we don't explicitly think of it as such. Like, it is positive. Like, hey, you woke up and you have a job, you're in a comfortable space, you're in like a nice apartment or house,
safe place.
Safe place.
Yeah.
You got plenty of food, you got plenty of water, plenty of sustenance, that's all positive. And then, one negative thing happens to us, and then we're like, oh God, my fucking life sucks. Like, why am I meant to have a bad life? And then, you're talking about that to your colleagues at work, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? Yeah, my life sucks too, kind of thing, even though they're in the same positive situation as you generally. Right,
dude. And that's the ripple effect we've been talking about, like this like in a way that's like emotional, like what were we talking about? Word of mouth marketing.
Yeah.
Like it's true, man, because like it's very interesting, because we do have a lot of positive things that are going on for ourselves. And I think that is something that negative mindset is something that's so habitually ingrained. And I think a big part of that is because we've gotten attention from that. And I think socially people have gotten attention from that, of my life sucks. Like, holy shit, let me coddle to this person because they're explaining how shitty their life is. Right. When, granted, there are people who do go through some pretty horrific experiences, and I'm not taking away from that at all. But in the general population, I do think, like you explained, like a lot of water, you have a safe shelter, you have food, you have, a job, you have all of these things that are very positive, but it's just so easy to go to that negative because that kind of gets a response, and that's exactly. That's that shift that we need to really work on and I think we can do that through good conversation, like you were talking about. It's like just choosing to change our mindset towards something more positive and having a little bit more gratitude for things, because it has an effect on yourself, and it will also have an effect on people around you.
Exactly. It really just boils down to the individual level and individual willingness, to elicit those positive changes in not only your life, but also like it'll have that ripple effect. It'll ripple out to, the lives of people around you. Like it's so monumentally important. And so I want to make sure that as many people as possible, like understand like that terminology and how to apply it,
I agree, man. And I really thank you for that. And I think that's where mental resiliency comes in too. It's recognizing when you are talking in that negative light about yourself or about your external situation, and choosing to be like, nope, we're not going to go down this. We're going to choose to be positive right now about the situation. And that mental resiliency for the longevity is continuously choosing, because it's a conscious behavior, to look at that in a positive light.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Man. I agree. Well, Kyle, dude, it was good to talk to you, man. I really appreciate you like reaching out to me for one. That was really humbling, and I really appreciate that. Was like the first message I got from people, like having gratitude for this. And I'm really glad that you were able to be a part of it and us have like really good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, I'd always like thought about these topics for a while, and I've had a few conversations with like friends and colleagues about them. But I was really appreciative that this avenue that you have of introducing this to just like bystanding listeners potentially, I thought was going to be a great idea, and so that's why I wanted to reach out to you. So I really, really appreciate you having this podcast in the first place, and then also just being on here to have a meaningful conversation with me.
Thank you, man. And it's my pleasure to have that conversation with you. Thank you for taking time, bro. I know you're on night shift, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course, man. No problem.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Take care.